My dad is a great man. He, throughout my now nearly 30 years of life, has taught me so many amazing lessons. He taught me the value of hard work. He taught me how to believe in myself. He gave me the confidence to believe in myself. You see, when I was growing up, he instilled in me the belief that I could do anything I set my mind to. And despite all of that, that is not the most valuable lesson that my dad ever taught me. In fact, the most valuable lesson that my dad ever taught me wasn't a direct lesson at all, but rather an indirect lesson that he taught me. And I'm going to go into that. But before we go there, a little bit of context on who my dad is. My dad is, he's like in his late 60s now. I think he's 68. I can't remember. But my dad grew up middle-class family. Went to school, went to Cal Berkeley for undergrad, got his master's at MIT. Shortly after college, found a job working as a nuclear engineer, so he's a brainiac, at General Electric. Took it up as a gig that he thought he'd be at for a couple of years. Turned into a 35-plus year endeavor. He was a lifer for GE. And for his first 10, 15, 20 years at the company, he loved it. It was the reason that him and my mom met. He went down to Mexico for a 6-month consulting trip, working at Laguna Verde in Veracruz. And that 6-month trip turned into nearly a 10-year trip. And in that time, consulting at Laguna Verde, making sure that the plant didn't blow up, he met my mom. My mom was a secretary at one of the offices, and the rest is history. Eventually, they moved back up to Yorba Linda in Southern California, and then finally, they made their way up when I was about 5 years old to San Jose. And I've been in San Jose ever since then. I noticed a change in my dad sometime in elementary school, like later in elementary school. I noticed that he just wasn't as happy. And I just knew that he was unhappy because of his job. He was unhappy with his work. He'd come home stressed. He'd be grumpier. He just wasn't as content with life anymore. And he continued down that path. But of course, eventually I was in middle school and high school, and given the age, I just cared less and less about his well-being because I was living in my own world, and well, I just kind of accepted that that was the new him. So, all throughout high school, he was still so supportive of me. Was at every speech and debate tournament, was at every theater production for me. And then I went off to Stanford, went to college, always cheering me on from the sidelines, paid for my education. I have almost practically zero student debt because of my mom and dad. When I came home from graduation, at Stanford, I was supposed to take a trip with my dad. And my dad said, "Hey, son, I know that we're supposed to take this trip, but I can't go with you." And I was like, "What? Why can't you go with me?" And he kind of gave me the runaround for a little bit. After several minutes of back and forth, probably about 30 minutes or so, they finally let it out that my dad had a heart attack about a month prior. This is in 2014. And at first I was angry. Then I was upset and sad. And the realization that I had almost lost my dad finally started to set in. And I just had a total breakdown. Like, I've never broken down like that before. And haven't since. When you realize the mortality of your parents, I guess that is what happens if you're close with them, or maybe even if you're not. Rewind 6 months prior, I had seen how stressed out my dad was. I mean, he hated his job. He hated his manager. He hated everything about General Electric. They treated him like shit. And as a result, he treated himself like shit. He didn't eat well. He didn't sleep well. He didn't exercise. He put too much emphasis, too much focus on the shit that was feeding his family that he forgot to focus on himself. I guess what he forgot is that you can't feed your family if you're not alive. But, nevertheless, 6 months prior, I had told him, I had made the proclamation. I said, "Dad, you keep eating like this, you keep treating yourself like this, you keep stressing out like this." I mean, you could see it in his face. He just wasn't enjoying life anymore. I told him, "You're going to have a heart attack." I regret putting that out there in the universe, but at the time, I didn't know how to effectively communicate my feelings to him, that I was sad. I was frustrated to see him not being himself. So, it was around that time, obviously, that I was in limbo with my own life. I just graduated from Stanford University with a bachelor's degree in biology, and I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. That's about it. And I also knew at that point that I probably didn't want to be an actor. But aside from that, I had no real idea as to what I wanted to do. But I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew that I didn't want to work for anybody. What I realized in my dad's 35 plus years at a company is that company was always going to be the limiting factor. I wanted to be my own boss because I saw the value in never having to answer to anyone except for me. Not having anyone else dictate my destiny, my happiness. No manager to tell me, do this or do that, and ruin my afternoon or my evening with my kids. No manager to drive me insane, to treat me like shit, like my dad's managers treated him. And he probably won't admit it, that they caused this much unhappiness, but I know. Why? Because he told my mom, and my mom would tell us. So I knew I wanted to be my own man, that I wanted to create my own destiny, that I wanted to be my own boss. And I started my career in real estate. It made perfect sense. I was like, wow, this is a career that I can be my own boss, that I can create my own destiny, that I can truly create my own path and not have to answer to anyone. And so I did. And flash forward almost 7 years later, life has never been better. I don't have that same stress. I don't have those same stressors that my dad does. And within the first couple of years of me selling real estate, or for the first couple of years of me selling real estate, I had this preconceived notion, or this false sense that everyone should be their own boss. What I realized is that the vast majority of people, they need the structure, they need the employer, they require the infrastructure and the support that a company provides. Not everyone's meant to work for themselves. And as I started to add independent contractors and employees to my company, I realized I don't have to be like that manager that my dad had, or those managers that my dad had. I don't have to treat them the way that they were the way that my dad was treated. Because even though not everyone is meant to work for themselves, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Even if you're an employee, that doesn't mean that you're a slave or a servant. It means that you're a human being who is working not for me, but with me. Striving towards a greater goal, not fuck you, do this job, or I'm going to fire you. The most valuable lesson my dad ever taught me was not a direct lesson at all, but rather an indirect one. One that I learned from his 35 plus years of struggles at General Electric. 35 years, but the last half of it. The lesson I was taught was lead with empathy. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. And that's one of the core pillars, the foundation of selling Silicon Valley, and it will be the cornerstone and the foundation of every company that I build until the day that I die. Why? Because I saw firsthand how corporate America can ruin not just an individual's life, but an entire family's life. So on today, Father's Day, I want to say, Dad, I love you. I'm so glad that you're still alive. I'm so glad that you finally realized that you didn't have to take it anymore. Thank God you retired. And thank you. Thank you for teaching me such a valuable lesson. And I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that for me to realize that I can be better. But that's all we can do, is learn. Not just from our own mistakes, but from others. Happy Father's Day, Dad.